Long ago, in a far corner of the galaxy, a council of alien leaders gathered inside a grand hall made of crystal walls and glowing symbols. The hall was filled with voices that echoed like thunder, but only one voice spoke of danger. An old alien. Historian stood in the middle of the council carrying dusty stone tablets and digital scrolls that had not been touched for centuries. His hands shook, but his eyes were sharp. He told them that the records spoke of a species called humans. The others laughed at the very word because in their history humans were nothing more than myths from a forgotten war. They believed humans had been destroyed long ago and were never seen again. But the historian's voice grew heavy as he warned that the records did not lie. They spoke of battles where whole fleets were broken by human courage and weapons no one else could understand. He showed them burned ruins of ancient worlds left behind by wars where humans had stood alone against countless enemies. The council members ignored him. They told him the galaxy had moved on and that no such threat existed anymore. One leader called the stories children's tales, while another said the humans were weak and already erased. The historian's words fell into silence, but in his heart he felt the truth pressing hard. Somewhere out there he believed humans were not only alive but waiting. Beyond the crystal walls, stars shone cold and endless. Rumors already traveled through the markets of smaller colonies. Traders whispered of ghost ships moving without sound and colonies vanishing overnight. At first many thought it was pirates, but survivors who escaped spoke of something worse. They said the attackers fought with skill and fury never seen before. They said their eyes glowed with the fire of vengeance, and their weapons tore ships apart like paper. The council dismissed these reports as fear and lies. They told their people not to worry and ordered silence. But the historian sat alone in his chamber, staring at the records carved in stone. The words were older than empires, older than the council itself. They spoke of humans as builders of worlds and destroyers of armies. They warned that humans never forgot and never forgave. The historian wondered why the council would ignore such clear warnings. He began to fear that the same mistake made by the ancients was now being repeated. He tried again to bring the records forward. He stood before the council a second time and spoke louder. He described a war thousands of years ago when every alien race joined together in desperation. He said even then humans had almost won. He spoke of their strength, their cleverness, their refusal to surrender even when outnumbered. But the council waved their hands and told him to sit. They said peace had lasted too long for war to return. They said no ghost of the past could rise again. Yet outside the great hall, storms gathered across the stars. Merchant ships traveling between worlds disappeared without signal. Colonies stopped answering transmissions. Patrol fleets sent to investigate never returned. A few broken ships limped home with terrified crews. They told the same story again and again. The enemy was fast. The enemy was merciless. The enemy spoke in a language old and harsh. The crews swore they heard one word repeated over and over. The word was human. In the quiet of his study, the historian replayed the reports. He listened to static-filled recordings of battle. Among the screams and explosions, he caught a voice strong and clear. It was a human voice saying, "We are coming back." His blood turned cold as he realized the records were not warnings of the past, but warnings of the future. The galaxy was not safe. The threat was real. The council still laughed in their halls, but the shadows of humanity were moving closer every day. The forgotten records were beginning to breathe again, and the old stories were no longer just stories. They were truth waiting to strike. And the historian knew with dread that when humans returned, the galaxy would remember why their name was once spoken with fear. The council chamber was filled with voices once again, as the historian stood tall, holding the same ancient records in his trembling hands. He spoke with urgency, telling them that the disappearances were no longer accidents or the work of pirates. He explained that the survivors of recent attacks had described the same thing, and their words matched exactly what the records had foretold. His voice echoed against the crystal walls as he showed fragments of destroyed ships collected by scavengers. The marks on the hulls were not random. They were precise strikes meant to disable and kill with frightening skill. He reminded them that only one species was ever recorded with such relentless tactics, and that was humanity. The council shifted uneasily, but most refused to listen. One elder laughed, saying that even if humans were alive, they could never stand against the combined power of the Galactic Alliance. Another accused the historian of spreading fear for personal glory. Their arrogance blinded them to the evidence before their eyes. The historian grew desperate and presented more proof. He revealed an ancient archive hidden deep in the old library of their homeworld. It contained records of entire fleets lost to human warships long ago. He showed images of ruined planets burned by firestorms unleashed by human weapons. He read aloud a passage that said the only way the galaxy defeated humans was through unity of every race. Yet even then the victory was incomplete because the humans did not surrender. They simply vanished. The historian's words grew heavy, and he begged the council not to dismiss the danger. He warned them that the ancient records were not myths, but a history that was repeating itself. He told them that the silence of colonies and the wreckage found across space were the signs of humanity's return. The council still shook their heads. They claimed there was no solid proof that these attacks were human. They said it was more likely a new unknown enemy using fear to weaken them. But the young commander who had listened quietly felt a chill in his heart. He had seen the same reports. He had spoken with broken survivors who whispered the same word, over and over. Humans. In the shadows of the chamber, the commander began to think that the historian might be right. Days later, the commander secretly began an investigation of his own. He studied the battle reports and compared them to the ancient records. What he found made his blood run cold. The patterns of attack were identical. The same ambush strategies, used by humans thousands of years ago, were being used again. The same swift destruction of enemy command ships, the same focus on military targets, the same precision that allowed no escape. The evidence was too strong to ignore. While the council held endless debates, the outer colonies continued to fall. Families disappeared overnight. Trade routes turned silent. Patrol ships sent to protect the borders were torn apart in minutes. The few survivors described ships that seemed old, yet far more advanced than anything they had ever faced. These ships did not broadcast signals. They did not respond to hails. They appeared like ghosts from the void, striking with unstoppable fury before vanishing into the darkness. Whispers spread across the markets and spaceports. Traders spoke in hushed tones about humans returning to claim revenge. Civilians began to fear that the council was lying to them. Tension grew as fear spread faster than light. The historian tried once more to speak to the council, but this time he was silenced. Guards escorted him from the chamber, and his warnings were dismissed as madness. Yet outside the walls, the truth was unfolding. More survivors brought back the same story. They said the attackers looked like them in shape, but more fierce, more determined, and more terrifying. They said their eyes burned with rage, and their voices carried the weight of old pain. They repeated a phrase again and again. "We remember." The young commander could no longer ignore the truth. He secretly contacted the historian who had been cast aside. Together, they studied the old records and the new reports. A picture began to form. The humans had not been destroyed as history claimed. They had survived in the shadows, waiting for the day when they would rise again. The commander asked why the records had been buried and why the council refused to listen. The historian explained the terrible truth. Long ago after the war, the victors rewrote history to erase humanity's story. They wanted future generations to believe humans were gone forever. The records that remained were hidden away, forgotten by most, and ridiculed by those who still remembered. The council feared the truth because they knew if the galaxy realized humans were returning, panic would spread and unity would shatter. They believed silence was safer than preparation. But silence could not stop what was coming. Each day, the attacks grew bolder. The humans were testing the galaxy's defenses. They were cutting off supply lines, destroying patrols, and watching the Council do nothing. The historian told the commander that the ancient records had warned of this exact moment. They said that when humans returned, they would strike first, at the edges, at the forgotten places, until fear weakened the heart of the galaxy. Then when the time was right, they would strike at the center with unstoppable force. The commander felt a heavy weight pressing on his chest. He realized that the galaxy was walking blindly into its own destruction. The Council would not act until it was too late. He made a decision that night. He would find the humans himself. He would see with his own eyes what kind of enemy they had become. If the records were true, then the galaxy was facing a storm unlike any before. The historian warned him that the path was dangerous, but the commander only nodded. He said someone had to know the truth before the darkness swallowed them all. As the Council celebrated their false peace and ignored the signs, a lonely ship left the safety of their worlds and flew toward the silence of the outer colonies. Its engines burned bright against the void, carrying the commander into the unknown. Behind him, the historian whispered a final warning. Ancient records spoke of humans, but no one listened. And now the stars themselves seemed to tremble as shadows, gathered at the edge of the galaxy, waiting for the moment to strike. The young commander traveled through the dark lanes of space, his ship moving silently toward the abandoned colonies that once thrived with trade and life. The stars around him felt colder than before, as if the galaxy itself held its breath. He studied every signal and scanned every system, but most places were empty graveyards of burned stations and shattered fleets. Entire worlds that once glowed with city lights were now dark, silent, and lifeless. The commander recorded every ruin he saw, knowing the Council would dismiss it as the work of pirates. Yet deep in his heart, he knew this destruction was not random. It was too precise, too ruthless. Pirates killed for profit, but these attacks were meant to send a message. Days passed as he drifted further from safe space, until one night he picked up a weak distress signal from a mining colony. His heart raced as he changed course toward the broken planet. When he arrived, he found wreckage scattered across orbit. Burned freighters floated aimlessly, torn open like paper. He descended through the dusty clouds and landed near the shattered remains of the colony outpost. Inside, he found only silence-broken doors and blood-stained walls. Yet in the deepest chamber, he discovered a group of survivors hiding in fear. Their faces were pale and their eyes wide with terror. When he asked what had happened, they whispered only one word: humans. The commander listened as they described the attack. Silent ships had descended from the blackness of space, their engines making no sound. The ships were old in design, but moved with terrifying speed. Soldiers in dark armor stormed the colony, striking down every guard with perfect shots. But they did not kill the unarmed civilians. Instead, they left them shaking in fear and whispered a phrase that echoed in the commander's mind. "We are coming back." The survivors said the humans moved like shadows, and their eyes carried fury that could not be forgotten. The commander tried to comfort them, but inside he felt the same fear. He recorded their testimony and left the planet heavy with dread. On his way back through the system, his ship sensors caught something strange. A shadow moved across the stars behind him. He turned his vessel, but nothing appeared. Suddenly, his screens filled with static, and a single voice spoke across the channel. A human voice, deep and sharp, saying, "You are watching us." The commander froze as the signal ended, leaving only silence. His ship alarms screamed as an unknown vessel appeared on his radar. It was large, dark, and shaped like nothing in the current fleets. It looked old, almost ancient, but it glided with power. The commander held his breath as the vessel approached. For a moment he thought they would destroy him, but instead it passed close enough that he could see strange markings carved into its hull. They were symbols of Earth, an ancient banner that had not been seen in thousands of years. As the human ship drifted away, a single transmission appeared on his screen. The message was short, only 2 words, but enough to shake his soul. "We remember." Then the ship vanished into the void, leaving no trace on his sensors. The commander sat frozen, realizing he had just seen the truth that the council refused to believe. Humans were alive, and they were returning with purpose. When he returned to his own people, he tried to report what he had seen, but the council silenced him as they had silenced the historian. They accused him of spreading fear and claimed his recordings were fabrications. Yet whispers spread among lower officers and traders who had seen the evidence. Fear began to move through the ranks of ordinary people who no longer trusted their leaders. In the shadows, taverns and ports echoed with the same rumor. Humans had come back, and the galaxy would soon pay the price of its forgotten sins. The commander felt torn between duty to the council and the truth he had witnessed. He knew that if no one prepared, the galaxy would fall. Secretly, he met again with the historian and told him everything. The old alien was not surprised. He explained that the records had always spoken of this moment when humans would rise from the ashes of their destroyed world. He reminded the commander that the ancient texts said humanity could never be erased because they carried survival in their very blood. The commander asked why the humans were sparing civilians. The historian only shook his head and said, perhaps. They wanted vengeance, not chaos. Perhaps their war was not against innocent people, but against the rulers who once tried to destroy them. The commander thought about the survivors of the colony who had been spared and about the words whispered by the soldiers. "We are coming back." It did not sound like senseless conquest. It sounded like unfinished justice. Yet justice inhuman. Hands might burn the galaxy to ash. As days passed, more reports came in. Entire fleets disappeared. Space stations went dark. Silent recordings captured glimpses of human ships moving like predators across the stars. The council still told the galaxy that nothing was wrong, but fear had already spread too far. Some races began to prepare, secretly arming their fleets and fortifying their borders. Others whispered of surrender before the storm arrived. And in the darkness beyond the edge of known space, human ships gathered unseen, preparing for the moment when their name would no longer be spoken in whispers, but shouted in terror. The forgotten records were no longer forgotten. They were alive, written again in fire and steel across the stars. And the commander knew the worst truth of all. The humans were not just returning. They were already here, watching, listening, and waiting. The commander's ship drifted into the silent system known as Vaynar's Edge, a place once crowded with outposts and trade stations, but now reduced to dust and shadows. He had chosen this place because reports said several fleets had vanished, here without leaving even wreckage. As his scanners reached into the void, he felt a weight in his chest heavier than before. The stars themselves seemed dimmer, as though they too remembered what had happened. At first, his instruments showed nothing but broken satellites and faint debris fields. Then, as he pushed deeper, he found the remains of a battle that chilled his blood. Dozens of warships floated silently, torn apart, in ways no pirate could have achieved. Hulls were split cleanly and half-reactors were pierced with surgical precision, and command decks had been annihilated with single strikes. He drifted closer, recording every image. This was not random destruction. It was the work of a predator that understood exactly how to kill. As his ship glided past the shattered wreckage, he saw something caught in the frozen drift. It was a torn banner of cloth impossibly preserved in the vacuum of space. His eyes widened as he recognized the faded design. It was not alien. It was human. The banner bore the old Earth insignia, scarred, but still visible, a circle with stars across it. His hands trembled as he brought it aboard and locked it inside a sealed chamber. This was proof beyond doubt that the attackers were human. But as he stared at the banner, he felt something more than fear. He felt the weight of history. pressing down on him. These were not ghosts. These were survivors who had carried their identity through centuries of silence. Suddenly, his ship's lights flickered and his sensors screamed with warning. A transmission appeared on his main screen, though he had not called for one. Words appeared in his own language, yet the tone was unmistakably human. The message was short. "We remember." His heart pounded as the words repeated once, then faded, leaving silence behind. He knew this was not an accident. They were watching him. His ship sensors detected movement behind the largest wreck. Out of the shadow slid a massive ship unlike any he had seen before. Its surface was jagged, dark, and scarred from countless battles. It did not broadcast any signal, yet its presence filled the void with menace. He held his breath, afraid to move, afraid to even breathe. For a long moment, the human vessel hovered before him, its weapon ports glowing faintly as though deciding whether he was worth the shot. Then slowly the ship turned away, drifting back into the shadows. But before it vanished completely, a voice filled his ship one more time, deep and sharp. "You are not ready." The commander sat frozen, unable to respond. His ship trembled as though the very air had grown colder. He realized the humans could have destroyed him easily, but chose not to. They wanted him alive, perhaps to carry a message, or perhaps to be a witness. He could not be sure. He turned his ship toward safer space, but his mind burned with questions. Why spare him? Why leave such clear evidence? Why reveal themselves at all? The historians. Words returned to him like a haunting. Humans never forgive. Humans never forget. The commander replayed the recording again and again, hearing the voice in the static. "We remember." It was not just a statement. It was a promise. When he finally returned to his own territory, the council listened to his report with anger rather than concern. They accused him of inventing lies to stir panic. They called the human banner a forgery and the transmission a trick. They dismissed the wreckage as old battle remains. The commander's jaw tightened as he stood before them. He knew they were blind, but he also knew their fear was real. They hid it behind arrogance, but he had seen their nervous glances. They wanted to believe the humans were gone because the alternative was too terrifying. When the council silenced him again, he left the chamber in fury. He could not shake the image of the human ship sliding from the wreckage like a predator returning to a hunting ground. He walked the dark corridors of his ship, wondering how many more councils, how many more leaders would ignore the truth before the galaxy was consumed. That night, he met again with the historian in secret. The old alien listened carefully as the commander described the banner, the message, and the ship. The historian closed his eyes and whispered that the records had always spoken of such things. He revealed passages that had been hidden even deeper than before. They spoke of humanity's vow to return not in peace, but in judgment. The commander asked why humans would leave him alive. The historian answered softly, "Perhaps they want the galaxy to know. Perhaps they want fear to spread before they strike. Or perhaps they want us to remember who they are before it is too late." The commander could not sleep. His mind replayed the burning wreckage, the preserved banner, and the voice that had cut into his soul. He knew the humans were sending a message that the galaxy's time of ignorance was ending. Out in the darkness, fleets gathered unseen, and he understood that every moment wasted by the council brought the galaxy closer to destruction. As his ship prepared for its next journey, he felt both dread and determination. He would keep searching, even if it meant defying his own people, because the truth was no longer hidden. The shadows of Earth had returned. The forgotten records were not myths, but warnings carved in blood and steel. And somewhere beyond the stars, the humans were waiting, watching, preparing. The commander whispered to himself as his ship's engines roared, "If the council refuses to listen, then I will. For I have seen the truth, and the truth is coming." The Border Patrol fleet moved silently along the edge of controlled space, its ships spread wide across the black void. To the crews, it was supposed to be a simple mission to scan trade lanes and watch for pirates, yet unease lingered in their voices. Rumors had already spread too far, and every pilot whispered the same name in fear: humans. The commanders of the patrol laughed off the stories and told their crews not to believe ghost tales, but even they could not ignore the fact that colonies had gone dark and fleets had vanished. The night was quiet until one sensor operator shouted in alarm. An unknown vessel had appeared at the edge of detection, moving faster than anything they had recorded before. Orders rushed through the fleet as they tried to identify the intruder. But the ship gave no signal and no response. It looked strange on the scanners, its shape old yet sleek, its movements sharp and deliberate. One commander demanded a hail be sent, but silence was the only reply. Then, without warning, the human ship moved. It accelerated with impossible speed, cutting through space like a blade. Before the fleet could react, its weapons opened fire. Explosions ripped across the darkness as entire patrol ships were torn apart in seconds. The fleet scrambled to defend itself, but nothing worked. Their weapons barely touched the enemy while their defenses crumbled under precise strikes. Within minutes, the proud patrol force was nothing but burning wreckage drifting in silence. Yet the humans did not destroy everything. They left one ship disabled, floating powerless among the debris. On board, the surviving crew sat in shock, unable to understand why they had been spared. Then their communication screen flickered alive. A figure appeared wearing dark armor and a helmet marked with the old Earth insignia. The voice that spoke was cold but clear. "Tell them, tell your council, tell your people, we never left." The screen went dark and the human ship vanished into the stars, leaving behind only fear. The survivors carried the message back to their homeworlds, and soon every corner of the galaxy whispered the same story. The humans had returned. The council tried desperately to silence the rumors, but the truth spread faster than their lies. Soldiers spoke of invincible ships, merchants told of silent fleets passing through trade lanes, and civilians repeated the terrifying words: "We never left." The commander, who had already seen the truth, listened to these stories with grim acceptance. He knew now that the humans were no longer hiding. They wanted the galaxy to know they were here. The historian warned that this was the first step of their war. He explained that humans had always fought with strategy, not only with weapons. Fear itself was their weapon, and already the galaxy was drowning in it. Yet something about the reports troubled the commander. The humans had spared the survivors just as they had spared civilians in other raids. They struck only at military forces, never at the helpless. It was as though they followed a code of their own. The commander wondered what their true goal was. Was it conquest or vengeance? Was it destruction or justice? The council, however, ignored all questions. Instead, they gathered their largest fleets in secret, hoping to crush the humans with overwhelming force. They told their people nothing but, behind closed doors, they prepared for war. The commander tried to warn them again, but his words were dismissed as fear-mongering. He was ordered to remain silent, but he refused. He knew that underestimating humans would doom them all. Nights passed and the galaxy grew darker. Entire systems shut down in fear and trade collapsed. No one dared travel far from their homeworlds. Yet in the empty void, human ships moved like shadows, preparing for something larger than anyone imagined. One evening, the commander stood on the observation deck of his ship, staring into the stars. He remembered the human voice that had spoken to him. "You are not ready." He now understood those words were true. The galaxy was not ready. Not ready for the fury of a people who had survived fire and extinction. Not ready for the vengeance of a race that never forgot. And not ready for the storm that was already breaking across the stars. For the humans had returned not as whispers, but as a force of war, and soon the galaxy would learn the meaning of their promise. We never left. Across the galaxy, the message spread like wildfire. Humans had returned, and no wall of silence could hold back the fear anymore. The survivors of the destroyed patrol fleet carried the words of the armored human warrior to every corner of space. And soon markets, taverns, and military outposts buzzed with the same phrase, "We never left." The council still stood firm in denial, insisting that the attacks were random and the survivors had been tricked by illusions, but their voices no longer carried the same weight. People began to doubt, and in that doubt, fear grew deeper. Civilians whispered in their homes, soldiers exchanged nervous glances, and even governors of distant colonies questioned whether their leaders truly understood the danger. Despite the chaos, one strange detail became clear to those who studied the attacks. Humans only struck military targets. Outposts, fleets, and weapons depots burned, yet the unarmed, the weak, and the ordinary people were always left behind. To some, this looked like mercy, but to others it was even more frightening because it meant the humans were not mindless destroyers. They were choosing carefully who to kill and who to spare. That kind of discipline meant planning, and planning meant a greater war was coming. The young commander watched all of this unfold with grim silence. He had seen the truth with his own eyes, and now the galaxy was beginning to understand what he had known all along. The historian joined him often, and together they studied the new reports. Each confirmed the same pattern. The humans were not just attacking, they were testing. They struck in different systems, always targeting defenses, never civilians always, leaving behind survivors to carry the message. We are back, we never left, and we remember. The commander asked the historian why the humans would do this, and the old alien answered softly, because fear is the first battlefield. The humans want the galaxy afraid before they strike in full. They want the rulers divided and the people doubting. Already the council was breaking under the pressure. Some members demanded immediate war, others begged for peace, and still others tried to pretend nothing was happening. Their endless arguments left them paralyzed while the humans grew stronger. Outside the chambers, colonies were in chaos. Some worlds began building underground shelters, while others demanded weapons to defend themselves. In the darkness of space, fleets moved secretly, preparing for battles that no one wanted to admit were coming. Traders refused to travel in whole. Sectors fell into silence. The commander could see it clearly. The galaxy was already at war, even if no one wanted to call it that. But something inside him kept questioning the pattern. If humans wanted simple revenge, they could have burned entire planets, yet they had not. If they wanted conquest, they could have enslaved civilians, yet they had not. Instead, they struck at governments, at military fleets, at leaders who once held power over the war long ago. The historian reminded him of the records. It was written that after the ancient war, humanity swore a vow to never forgive those who tried to erase them. Perhaps the humans now returned not to destroy everyone, but to punish those who had carried the blood of the old betrayal. This thought troubled the commander because it meant the war was not random chaos, but justice in the eyes of humanity. Justice, however, could burn as hot as vengeance, and the galaxy might not survive it. Each day, the reports became more terrifying. Human ships appeared without warning, faster than any scanners could track. Their weapons pierced shields that had once been considered unbreakable. Entire fleets fell in minutes, and each time the humans vanished before reinforcements could arrive. Rumors said they had hidden bases across the void built in secret over centuries. Others said they had turned forgotten ruins into fortresses. No one knew the truth, but everyone knew one thing: the humans were always one step ahead. The commander felt powerless as he watched the council argue while people panicked. He tried to warn them again, saying that if they did not understand the human code of war, they would fall into every trap. But his words were ignored or silenced. Yet he noticed that among ordinary soldiers, whispers began to spread of respecting the humans, even admiring them. They spoke of their discipline, their restraint, their terrifying skill. Some even said perhaps the humans were right to return because the galaxy had hidden the truth for too long. The historian warned that such thoughts could shatter the unity of the alliance. If soldiers began to doubt their leaders, then the humans would not need to fight at all. Fear and doubt would break the galaxy from within. The commander realized this was exactly the plan. The humans had turned the alliance into a crumbling wall long before their full fleets had even arrived. And then the reports came of something greater. Scouts claimed to have seen human armadas gathering at the edge of uncharted space. Not one ship, not 10, but hundreds, each larger and stronger than the ones already seen. The galaxy trembled as whispers turned into certainty. The storm was almost here. In his quiet moments, the commander stared into the stars and remembered the words the humans had spoken to him. "You are not ready." He knew it was true. They were not ready for the fury of a people who carried war in their memory like fire in their blood. They were not ready for enemies who chose carefully who to kill and who to spare. They were not ready for the moment when the shadows of Earth would rise fully into the light. And yet, no matter how much he tried to prepare, he knew it would not be enough. Because the humans had already won the first battle. The galaxy was afraid, divided, and lost. And in the silence of space, the humans were watching, waiting for the moment to strike. The council chamber shook with arguments louder than ever before as fear consumed every leader. Reports of human fleets were no longer whispers, but undeniable facts, yet still the rulers could not agree. Some demanded that all fleets unite immediately, for war, while others insisted on negotiations or retreat. The historian stood among them, his voice steady though his age showed in his trembling hands. He revealed that the records contained more than warnings. They contained the truth of the first war with humanity, a truth that had been buried for centuries. The chamber fell silent as he spoke of what had really happened. Long ago, when humans first spread among the stars, they met other species not with conquest, but with trade and curiosity. They built colonies on harsh worlds where no one else could survive, and they thrived through determination and will. Many alien races feared this rapid growth, for humans were different. They adapted too quickly and learned too fast. Soon, jealous leaders whispered that humanity would one day dominate the galaxy. Fear turned to alliance, and the great powers joined together to strike first. They declared humanity too dangerous to exist and launched a war of extermination. Billions of humans were burned in the fires of that war, their worlds turned to ash, and their fleets shattered. Yet the records showed something terrifying. Even against the united strength of the galaxy, humanity refused to die. They fought back with such fury that entire armadas were destroyed. World after world was scarred by battles where humans stood against impossible numbers and still held the line. The historian's voice grew heavier as he read aloud from the oldest text. It said, "The galaxy only survived because every empire united in desperation to bury Earth under endless fire. The skies of humanity's home turned black and oceans boiled, but even then the survivors disappeared into the shadows. No record told of their final defeat. Instead, the ancients wrote one warning in blood and ash: humans never forgive, humans never forget." The council listened in horror as the truth washed over them. They realized the humans were not monsters, rising from nowhere, but survivors of a betrayal so deep that no time could erase it. The historian looked into the eyes of every leader and said the humans are not attacking randomly. They are punishing the descendants of those who once tried to erase them. The commander, who had remained silent through much of the debate, finally spoke. He confirmed the historian's story with what he had seen. The humans spared civilians, but destroyed military fleets. They left survivors to spread their message. They were not hunting the weak, but targeting those in power. The council broke again into chaos. Some shouted that it was proof humans were dangerous beyond reason. Others whispered that perhaps humanity's vengeance was justified. For centuries, the galaxy had lived under a lie, believing humans were myths, while their ancestors' betrayal remained hidden. Now the lie was unraveling, and with it, the unity of the Alliance. Outside the chamber, the galaxy trembled. Soldiers began to question their orders. Citizens whispered that their leaders had brought this storm upon them. Some races began sending secret messages hoping to make peace with the humans before the war reached their worlds. The commander walked with the historian through the crystal halls after the meeting, both of them heavy with the knowledge of what was coming. The historian spoke softly, saying, "The galaxy made a choice long ago, and now it must face the consequences." The commander asked if there was any chance to stop the war. The historian shook his head and said, "Humans may forgive individuals, but they will not forgive empires. They will not forgive councils that hide the truth." The commander thought of the survivors spared by human soldiers and of the words he had heard again and again. "We remember." It was not just a threat. It was the voice of a people carrying the weight of centuries of betrayal. That night, as the council wasted more hours in argument, the commander studied the old records himself. He saw images of burned Earth cities of soldiers who fought until the last breath of children taken into the shadows when their homes fell. He understood then why the humans returned. They were not conquerors. They were survivors who had sworn that one day the galaxy would pay. The commander closed the records and felt his chest tighten. He knew what most of the council still refused to admit. The war was not about victory or defeat. It was about memory. The humans had come to remind the galaxy of what it had done, and as he looked into the dark stars beyond the chamber windows, he felt the same fear that once lived in the hearts of the ancients. Humanity was coming back, not as a legend, but as a storm that would wash away the lies of history. The forgotten. Records had been right all along, and now the galaxy would learn the price of ignoring them. Across the edges of known space, the storm began to rise as human fleets revealed themselves more boldly than ever before. No longer were they only shadows striking at patrols and vanishing. Now entire armadas appeared in the skies above border. Worlds, their ships larger and faster than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Alien commanders who once laughed at the thought of human survival now stared in horror as their fleets were broken in minutes. The humans fought with terrifying precision, striking only at military defenses while civilians watched helplessly from the ground. Cities trembled under the roar of battles, but the humans never bombarded them. Instead, they left messages carved into destroyed warships or burned into the skies with fire. "We remember. We are back." The words spread like a plague, and the galaxy drowned in fear. The council could no longer deny the truth, yet they remained paralyzed. Each empire blamed the other for the ancient betrayal. Old rivalries resurfaced as they argued about who had been responsible for humanity's near extinction. While they pointed fingers, the humans pressed deeper into the core. The commander saw reports flood in every hour, and each one confirmed his worst fears. The humans had adapted alien technology stolen in the past wars and hidden for centuries. Their ships carried weapons that blended old designs with stolen secrets. Shields collapsed before their beams engines burned before their missiles. The historian explained quietly that this was always humanity's gift. They learned faster than anyone else. They turned every defeat into a lesson and every lesson into a weapon. The galaxy thought it had buried humanity, but in truth, it had only given them time to evolve in silence. Entire planets surrendered without a fight as human fleets approached. Some governors even sent gifts or messages begging for mercy. Humans responded not with conquest but with silence. They ignored the pleas of civilians and continued their march against fleets and governments. The commander began to see the pattern more clearly than ever. Humanity was not trying to rule the galaxy. They were dismantling its powers one by one, targeting the same empires that had united against them long ago. The war was not about territory. It was about vengeance and justice. Yet justice in such a form was more terrifying than conquest. Across the stars, soldiers spoke in whispers of human honor. They saw that the humans spared those without weapons. They began to wonder if perhaps their leaders were truly guilty of the betrayal. Some even deserted their posts, unwilling to fight against those who struck only at oppressors. The council sensed this doubt and grew desperate. They demanded more propaganda, more lies telling the people that the humans were monsters who would burn every world. But the lies no longer worked. Too many had seen the truth with their own eyes. The humans had become more than soldiers. They had become symbols of a story the galaxy had tried to erase. The commander moved through his days torn between fear and reluctant respect. He remembered the human ship that had spared him and the words spoken to him in the darkness. "You are not ready." He wondered if the humans meant that the galaxy was not ready for their vengeance or not ready to face its own history. Either way, the truth was clear. Every battle showed that the humans had already won the first war, not through numbers, but through memory. The historian reminded him of the ancient vow written in blood. Humans never forgive. Humans never forget. That vow was now alive in every strike, every burning fleet, every whisper carried across the stars. One night, the commander received a private transmission from a distant colony. It showed a human soldier, without helmet, standing in the ruins of a destroyed military base. His face was scarred, his eyes fierce, yet his voice calm. He said, "We do not fight the innocent. We do not fight the weak. We fight those who once tried to erase us and those who still protect their lies. Tell your people the truth or watch the galaxy fall." The message ended, but the commander felt its weight more than any battle report. The humans were offering a choice: surrender the lie or suffer the war. He carried the message to the council, but as always, they dismissed it, calling it a trick meant to divide them. Yet he could see the fear in their eyes. They knew the truth, but would never admit it. They feared losing their power more than losing the galaxy. Outside their chambers, fleets burned and stars echoed with the thunder of war. Human banners once, thought destroyed, now flew again across conquered systems. The historian told the commander that the climax was near. The humans were gathering their full strength. Soon they would no longer strike at the edges. Soon they would descend upon the heart of the alliance itself. The commander looked into the endless dark and felt the inevitability pressing upon him. The galaxy had buried the truth, but the truth had returned with fire. The humans were rising, not as conquerors but as judges. And in their judgment, the galaxy would learn what it meant to betray a people who could never be broken. The skies above the core worlds grew darker with every passing day as the news spread that the human fleets were no longer content with striking borders or destroying outposts. They were moving inward like a tide that no force could hold back. Entire sectors fell in silence as fleets surrendered before even engaging. Others who dared to resist were shattered so quickly that no reinforcements ever arrived. The council sat in fear within their shining chambers, their voices breaking as they tried to command unity, yet unity no longer existed. Old allies broke away, secretly sending envoys into the void with desperate offers of peace, hoping to reach the humans before the storm arrived. But the humans remained silent. They neither answered nor accepted gifts. They only pressed forward with unbroken determination. The commander watched every report with a sinking heart, for he knew what no one else would say aloud. The humans had already won. The war itself was only their way of forcing the galaxy to remember. The historian confirmed his fears with words that weighed like iron. He said the record spoke of this moment not in detail, but in warning. The ancients wrote that if ever humanity returned, they would not stop until every lie was shattered. Their vengeance would not be measured in territory, but in truth. The commander looked into the tired eyes of the historian and saw both sorrow and grim acceptance. Together, they knew that the galaxy was about to face a judgment unlike any before. As human fleets struck deeper, they began leaving behind more messages, not only carved into wreckage, but broadcast openly across the stars. These messages carried not threats, but memories. They showed images of Earth burning under endless fire. They showed children hiding in ruined shelters. They showed soldiers standing in the last cities fighting until the skies collapsed. Entire populations across the galaxy saw the truth their leaders had buried. Citizens who once believed humans were legends or monsters now saw them as survivors of a betrayal so terrible that no time could erase it. Anger began to turn inward. People started asking why their ancestors had joined the betrayal, why their leaders had hidden the truth for centuries. Riots broke out on some worlds not against humans, but against their own governments. The Council called these uprisings dangerous acts of treason, yet their armies hesitated to crush them. Soldiers who had seen human mercy with their own eyes now questioned their orders. The galaxy was breaking not because of human weapons, but because of human memory. The commander received another private transmission, this time from a captured admiral who had been released by the humans. The admiral's voice was shaken as he described his capture. He said the humans held him alive not out of mercy, but out of purpose. They looked into his eyes and said, "Tell them what you have seen. Tell them the truth or the fire will spread until nothing is left." The commander carried this to the council, but once again they argued. Some still believed they could crush the humans if only they united. Others whispered of surrender, but none dared to speak openly. Fear had hollowed them, and indecision consumed every hour. Meanwhile, the humans pressed closer and closer. The historian whispered to the commander that the final blow was near. The humans were not striking blindly. They were choosing their targets carefully. Every fleet they destroyed, every government they shattered, carried history in its blood. The humans were not only avenging the past, they were reminding the galaxy that betrayal has a cost that cannot be erased. Soon it would not be outposts or colonies that burned, but the very heart of the alliance itself. The commander stood on the balcony of his quarters, looking at the stars beyond. He thought of the human soldier who had told him, "You are not ready." Perhaps the soldier had been right. Perhaps the galaxy had never been ready to face the truth of its own crimes. He wondered if there was any way to stop the storm. But deep inside, he knew the answer. The humans were not coming to negotiate. They were coming to finish what had been left undone. The stars flickered in silence as he turned back to his reports, each one more grim than the last. Fleet after fleet, lost. Government after government, collapsing. The storm was no longer at the edge. It was upon them. And in that silence, the commander realized that the forgotten records had been more than history. They had been prophecy. Humanity was not only surviving, humanity was returning as judgment, and now nothing could stand in their way. The final days came with a silence that weighed heavier than war itself, as the human fleets encircled the core worlds and cut off every route of escape. The Alliance leaders, once proud and untouchable, now sat trapped inside their grand halls, trembling as if the walls themselves had turned into a cage. The council chamber that once echoed with endless arguments had fallen into whispers. Some leaders spoke of surrender, others demanded one last stand, but none had the courage to act. Outside in the void, humanity waited with patience like a predator, certain of its prey. Their ships formed lines across the stars, each one a dark blade glinting with power. The commander stood on the observation deck and watched them arrive. He felt both fear and awe. Never before had he seen such discipline, such unity. The humans were fewer in number, yet every vessel radiated purpose. There was no wasted movement, no hesitation, only resolve carved into steel. He remembered the stories that humans fought like fire, consuming everything, and now he saw the truth. They did not consume blindly. They burned only what had betrayed them. As the fleets closed in, the humans began broadcasting again. This time, there were no words, only images of Earth long ago. The burning skies, the shattered cities, the last defenders raising their weapons against impossible odds. The images repeated across every channel, across every world. No one could look away. Citizens saw the truth, raw and undeniable. The galaxy had not destroyed monsters. It had tried to erase a people. And those people had returned not as ghosts, but as living judgment. The commander knew then that the war was already lost. The only question left was how it would end. When the first human ships entered orbit above the Council world, the skies turned black with their numbers. Defenses opened fire, but their weapons struck empty space as human vessels danced between them and cut them apart. The entire planetary defense grid collapsed in less than an hour. Cities below trembled, but the humans never fired on them. Instead, they targeted only military sites, leaving civilian areas untouched. Fear spread among the population, but so did something else, a sense of recognition. They saw in the humans a strength that came not from cruelty, but from memory. The commander received an urgent call from the Council, demanding he lead what was left of the fleets in one last defense. He obeyed, but in his heart he knew it was hopeless. The fleets met in the skies above the capital world, and the battle that followed was swift and merciless. Human ships tore through their formations with precision. Every strategy, every maneuver failed before it even began. Within minutes, the commander's fleet was in ruins. His own ship shook with fire until systems collapsed. As he stood on the bridge waiting for the end, a human transmission broke through the static. The voice was calm, strong, and filled with an unshakable certainty. It said, "This is not conquest, this is judgment. You chose silence over truth, and now you face the cost." Then the transmission ended, and silence returned. Yet his ship was not destroyed. Instead, human vessels surrounded it and disabled its weapons, leaving it adrift. The commander realized then that the humans had spared him again, not for mercy, but for purpose. They wanted witnesses. They wanted survivors to carry the truth when the war was done. On the surface of the capital world, human troops landed not with fire, but with banners of memory. They stormed the council chamber, their weapons ready, but their judgment greater than their rage. The leaders begged for mercy, offering wealth territory and promises. But the humans did not listen. They declared the council guilty of the greatest betrayal in galactic history. They stripped them of power and broadcast their crimes across every channel for all to see. Entire populations gasped as they learned that their ancestors had joined in Earth's destruction and their leaders had hidden it. Rage turned inward and the galaxy shook with unrest. No longer did the humans need to fight. The truth itself had become their greatest weapon. The commander watched as the council was taken away, their voices silenced forever. The humans did not kill them, but exiled them to the ruined worlds left behind by their own betrayals. A fitting punishment, one worse than death. The war ended not with fire, but with revelation. Across the stars, people rose against the lies they had been fed for centuries. Some chose to stand with the humans, others fell into chaos, but none could deny the truth any longer. The humans had returned, and their vengeance was complete. Yet in their victory there was no joy, only grim silence. They had not sought power, only memory. They had forced the galaxy to look at itself and see the stain it could never erase. The commander sat in the ruins of his ship, looking at the stars, and wondered what future would rise from this judgment. Would the humans rule, or would they vanish, again into the dark? No one knew, but one truth remained unshakable. The forgotten records had spoken, the prophecy had come true. Humanity had risen from ashes to stand as judges of the galaxy, and in their rise they had proven one thing beyond doubt. Humans never forgive, humans never forget.